All right, guys. So what we're going to go over in this, the first part in particular is just going to be a conversation and mostly me talking, to be honest. But I'll pause and give you guys some space to jump in here and there. So what we're going to go over today is compliance, and the first breakdown of that is TCPA compliance versus CTIA compliance, and the importance of understanding the difference between the two. Your B2B relationship with the carrier and how to optimize that, or with the carriers and how to optimize that. Launch Control's role as an SMS provider in this whole system. And then we're going to spend the second half of this. That whole part really should probably only take about 15 minutes, because the truth is that all of the big questions that people have it really just comes down to a lack of information. And once we fill in those very basic facts, I think everyone on this call will take a big sigh of relief and be able to kind of move forward from there, because it is actually quite a bit simpler than the blogs and the Mastermind scary posts. The sky is falling kind of stuff will make you believe the sky's not falling. It's a lot simpler than that. So we'll break that down. And then the second half, which I think will be useful, it's kind of an experience that you guys have probably had if you've worked with Jason. But we're going to go through some data, messaging, and just lead management best practices that will keep you more compliant within the system and help you build out a better routine and a better sales funnel conversion system for you and your team. Okay, sound good? All right, so let's start with the difference between TCPA compliance and CTIA compliance. So I want you guys to imagine in your heads two very separate bubbles, right? That do not intersect. There is no Venn diagram here, right? They're just very separate bubbles. Okay, so the bubble off to the, my left, your right, is TCPA compliance. This is federal level compliance that was originally enacted in 1991 to curb auto dialing, right? So they don't want any, and it's specific to phone. It didn't have nothing in the original documentation was written about text engagement. It was all about phone calls and to curb the use of auto dialers, because it got really annoying. People sitting at dinner, they pick up the phone, they hear, a pause, and then the auto message clicks in. And that was becoming rampant. And so there were laws put into place to slow that down, right? So compliance from a software perspective means that you cannot be a robodialer for phone calls and loosely by extension texts, which Launch Control is not. All of you have used it. You know that you have to click send to send the message. You know that you can edit that message. You know that via the text spinners that we are delivering unique messages to every recipient. So we are not in any way, shape, or form an auto dialer. The other element of TCPA compliance on a federal and by extension state level, each of the states, not each of the states, but a few of the states have their own kind of versions of TCPA compliance that change a little. None of them, with the exception of Utah, have any effect on your efforts through Launch Control. In Utah, the best practice, which we tell people when they sign up, is to double check their lists against the National Do Not Call Registry, which you don't have to do in the other states. Okay, so from a user perspective or from a subscriber perspective, you cannot sell the product or service unless you have verified opt-in data. Right? So as a wholesaler, you are not selling a product or a service. It is a one-on-one conversation between you and a homeowner. You're not taking a commission from the homeowner. The money that you earn, they're not aware of this, obviously, in the beginning of the conversation as a direct sell opportunity, but you make your money from the buyer, not from the homeowner. So you're not selling a product or service, you're simply giving them alternatives and facilitating those alternatives for them at no cost to the homeowner. Now, this use case has been vetted and proven multiple times. I know that there are cases that will sometimes pop up in the Mastermind groups and things. There was a case recently where a company was taken to court for a text message. Now, they won. based off of this precedent, right? They weren't selling a product or service. And two, if you really read into it, they broke some best practice rules that we're going to talk about that led directly to this. Namely, they did not DNC the homeowner when they asked repetitively to be taken off of that person's list. So they hit them again and again and again and again. Any one of those cases, which to my knowledge, no one at Launch Control has ever had a legal issue. But anytime I've looked into any legal issues that have happened, there's always something underlying, right? There was auto dialing happening in the background. There was a lack of DNC. There was a lack of respect for the recipient, right? And if you dig on any of those, you will find a lack of respect for the recipient, and you will find that it isn't just text messaging that is of issue. There's something larger, right? So in terms of TCPA legality, you're fine. It has been proven, the use case has been proven. Launch Control is a perfectly safe software to use. So in terms of TCPA compliance, you're good. All of the current changes, all of the sort of extra hoops that you've had to jump through is due to CTIA compliance. CTIA compliance is carrier best practices. In 2019, they put together a document, and that document was basically their collective efforts to ensure the best user experience that they could through text engagement, right? So that document and those best practices are what they are attempting to maintain. Okay, so when you register with Launch Control and through Launch Control, all we are doing is expediting the registration. We are not registering your company. We're just expediting the registration with the carriers. The carriers use a administrative body called the Campaign Registry, TCR. This allows you to register one time to engage with each of the carriers. So it saves you having to register your company 7 times with 7 different carriers, right? So what they're doing is essentially establishing a B2B relationship, a direct B2B relationship with your company. And by entering into that B2B relationship, there is the assumption that you will follow, to the best of your abilities, those best practices. Okay. So and by doing this, by having companies register, by having companies show opt-in on their website to be able to track who they're dealing with in the narrow channel of your company to the carriers, they're able to eliminate a lot of the big spam. Okay, the big spam is things like auto warranty renewals, student loan messaging, things that were going out in the hundreds of thousands, and very repetitively so, where people weren't able to opt out. They weren't able to control the amount of traffic coming into their personal phone numbers, and it was creating a bad user experience, right? So this one-to-one relationship that you set up with the carriers, that allows them to get rid of the big spam, and it allows them to give the opportunity for businesses to conduct conversations with recipients in a fair and an even way. Okay, pause for a second. Does that all make sense so far? The difference between what is federal regulations and what is CTIA best practices?
Would you be kind enough to sum this up within us one-liner?
Okay, one line.
Yeah,
is,
one line difference between both of them. Like the TCPA is federal level, and the CTIA is from carrier side to get us follow through the best practices.
Right. So TCPA, that's where all of the legal stuff comes in. It's big picture, it's macro level, it applies almost exclusively to auto dialing. Okay, put this off in a bucket, right? All of the things that you're doing right now in terms of having opt-in on your website, that does not cross over with legality. Entering your EIN number does not cross over into legality. These two buckets are not overlapping. right? It's
Mhm.
one just always been there for the last 4 or 5 years. No real big changes to TCPA. All of the changes have been in the other bucket, in the carrier best practice. So in a carrier best practice, and I'm going to get into this in more detail, the worst case scenario for breaking carrier best practices is your campaign gets shut down. You can't text anymore. Not legal. You're not getting sued. You simply get your campaign shut down. We don't want that. We're going to give you a bunch of steps to avoid that. But it's important to understand the difference between getting a B2B relationship shut off and finding yourself in legal trouble, right? The use case for texting for real estate investors is okay. It's proven, right? So what we need to do is to make improvements in user experience, right? Because we can make improvements in user experience, we can raise the level of engagement for the entire industry, okay? We raise the level of engagement for the entire industry, and this becomes evergreen. We can do this for years and years and years, and the amount of variation of things that we have to deal with, right? Well, now you have to give your EIN. Well, now you have to have this. That smooths out, because the only reason why we ever have additional things that we have to adjust to is because the recipients had a poor user experience and they reported that to the carriers. And then the carriers felt compelled to do something. The more that we can create a positive user experience for the homeowners, the more that this whole thing smooths out and becomes really, really easy. Okay. All right, so we'll answer all of the questions in the Q&A section. I do see some of them popping up. We'll deal with that in the Q&A section at the end. Okay, so let's talk about what your role with the carriers is. Okay, so I want to make sure that we're really clear on this. What launch control is doing, we are on one level, we are a piece of software. We deliver the messages. Right. On another, we are an organization that helps educate people and give you engagement best practices. That's you working with Jason. Okay. The part where you are in the beginning, where you're registering your account to get started with the carriers, all we are doing in that case is a white glove setup. We're expediting it for you, but it is 100% a connection between your company and the carrier. Are the carriers, plural, right? So when you enter into that relationship with the TCR, the way, or with the carriers, the way that traffic is viewed from AT&T, from Sprint, from Verizon, they don't look at traffic coming from launch control. They look at traffic coming from your campaign. So did you, through that narrow channel of your campaign, did you stick as close to best practices as possible? Right. And if they felt like there was a poor user experience, or if they feel like there's a poor user experience, your campaign is going to be subject to additional filtering. If that filtering finds a poor user experience for the homeowners, or from their perspective, for their paying customers, right? AT&T's paying customers, Sprint's paying customers, then you may be asked to include certain verification, or if they find that it's a truly poor user experience, your campaign may get shut off. Now, if your campaign gets shut off, it doesn't have anything to do with TCPA compliance. It means that your company is no longer able, at least under that registration, to continue using SMS as a tool. We do not want that to happen. Right? Like, can you re-register? Can you get a new EIN, re-register, get started? Sure. Can we help facilitate that? Yes, but we don't ever want to get to that point. We want to stop that from happening. Ryan, we're going to get to that. That's the second part of it. What constitutes a poor user experience? Okay. So just to recap, TCPA is the legal side of things. CTIA is user experience, your relationship with the carrier. 99% of everything that people are adjusting to right now, 100% of everything that people are adjusting to right now is in the CTIA bucket. Launch control and white gloves the setup of those registrations. And from there, it is your responsibility to maintain a positive relationship by maintaining a positive user experience. Okay, so any questions about that part? Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry because I'm
Yeah.
multitasking and you got my full attention now. So now basically what you're telling us is we good. We don't need to worry about nothing right now as long we using the spinners, we using different messages, and it's really about the carriers because you guys kind of like give us a white glove service when it comes to the federal law.
We give you the federal law is just use case. You don't have to worry about that. What we're helping you do is create a better user experience that's going to keep you on the straight and narrow with the carriers. If we keep you on the straight and narrow with the carriers, then the homeowners aren't going to have a bad experience. Homeowners don't have a bad experience, you have nothing to worry about. All right, like it's going to go smoothly.
Okay, and how do you guys do that?
So we'll get into that now in the second part. So it's a real partnership between us and you guys. Okay, so on an engineering level, you guys have seen a lot of what we do, right? So I know that sending out an initial message and then not being able to send out a second message can be a point of frustration to people. But we do that for compliance reasons because we have to create a good homeowner experience. The text spinners that you see in the app that equal each homeowner getting a unique message, we do that for compliance because think about it from a carrier perspective. If every single person that you were sending out a message to received some variation, not a variation of, but only a name change, and they got, hey, Jason, you own 57 Green Street, correct? Hey, Peter, you own 57 Green Street, correct? Hey, Marta, you own 57 Green Street, correct? Red flag. Nobody texts like that naturally, right? So what we do on an engineering level is help you create natural messaging. So this is, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but this is the biggest thing that you guys need to remember, okay? You're looking at a dashboard in launch control. Right? And you're sending 50 messages, 100, 150 messages at a time. But those messages are going to a single recipient. And if they respond and they get into your inbox, it's not only is it a winnable deal, you have to remember, imagine in your head, a person holding their phone, waiting for your response, right? Like they got your message, they read it, they responded to it. They are still looking at their phone. You have their captive attention. That is the gold standard in REI investment, to have the captive attention of a homeowner, and you've got it. And if you don't aim for really comprehensive follow-up, if you don't have an actual game plan on how to close that homeowner out and take advantage of the fact that they're staring at their phone waiting for your response, then you're losing opportunities, right? So the thing that's really amazing about this is creating a better user experience equals a lot more deals, right? Because having that focused attention on homeowners and actually treating them as human beings will lead to discovery calls. You get discovery calls, you get deals. You get deals, you get 20K turnover on each one of those, right? So if you want to build wealth through launch control, think about the homeowner. Close your eyes, imagine that person holding their phone in their hand. You have their captive attention waiting for your response, right? Do you want to just burn through those? Of course not. That's burning data. You want to be able to take each one of those responses that isn't a clear opt-out, that isn't a clear DNC, and challenge yourself and say, all right, this person's holding their phone. They're looking at their phone. They're waiting for my response. How do I win this? Right? How do I challenge myself to win this conversation? Because each deal that you close, and you know this, each deal that you close is a series of touch points. If you got to the point of a contract, you got that contract over to a buyer, you got the check. Add up the touch points that it took to get there. It wasn't one. It wasn't one text and done, right? Like you built up a series of touch points between you, the homeowner, the buyer in question, follow up with both. How many touch points did you have? How many of those would have been better through text? How many should have been a call? But knowing is, and having a game plan for that is the difference between not only really great user experience, but also the difference between making a little bit of money and making a lot of money. Okay. All right. So with that kind of in mind of creating the best possible user experience, being as compliant as you can be, let's segment this up. And Jason, you can share your screen if you want. Let's go through this as data, messaging, and then we'll talk about kind of list building and maintenance. Okay, so we're going to start with data. And with each section here, what I want you guys to be thinking about is creating a better user experience. By creating a better user experience, you are creating a very good relationship with you and the carriers in that very narrow channel that you established when you registered your company. You stay in that band of good user experience, and you will never have problems with the carriers, right? You'll be able to run your business for as long as you want using SMS as a tool, right? So let's start with data. You want to know who the user is, right? So you want to be able to segment your data down to specific groups, really use targeted data sets, right? So don't text Tampa, filter that down to segments that you can appeal to specific users. So within Tampa, who on your list is an out-of-state owner? Who on your list is in what we would call like money worries, right? They're in pre-foreclosure, they've got liens, that's those kind of things. How many of those cross over if you're stacking your lists? How many people are high equity? If they're high equity, do you know the age of the homeowner? Because that can make a difference. Do you know, can you drill all the way down to like a housing development so people know that you're looking for homes within a very specific neighborhood? The more local you can be, the more targeted you can be, the better your results will be, because you are, at the end of the day, speaking to an individual. So you want your messaging, even that first message, to speak to an individual. What I always tell my teams is that everything is a problem solution dynamic, right? So the two biggest things in real estate investment that you need to solve for, right, is one, identify their problem. What is their motivation? Do they know their alternatives? What is their timeline? All of that comes down to problem solving for the homeowner, right? And the second thing is timing, right? If they're not ready to sell today, there's a good chance they'll be ready to sell in 90 days, 120 days. We just have to plant the seed, get them thinking about non-MLS alternatives, and getting them to think about you as the solution that they need, right? Or the provider of the solution that they need. So what you want to do by segmenting, you're able to get a better idea of who specifically you're talking to so that you can problem solve for that individual, as opposed to the way that people started doing this 3-4 years ago, which is ineffective, of texting all of Tampa and saying, you know, hey, Peter, you own 57 Green Street, right? How about a cash offer? That's so oversaturated, so overdone that it's just not effective. You have to break through that. You have to speak to the individual. Okay. So if you think about that, if you really segment your data, like, can somebody give me an example of a targeted list that they'd want to hit up in their area?
Probate.
Okay. Probate, right? So, and can you think of a way to even filter that down a little bit more, or do we want to just go probate in general?
Well, we could go to inherited property, with one surviving spouse.
Okay. So what are the challenges with probate? Like, once you get them on a discovery call, what happens on that discovery call usually? How's that go?
A lot of responses I get, they're still going through the probate process. They're not ready to sell. Call them back later. I get, oh, please, not now. My husband just passed away. Not right now. It's just kind of like out of it. I get a lot of that, and I get a lot. We're not ready right now. Call us back in 2 months.
Okay, so a question of timing, right? Now, play armchair psychologist, right? Like a probate means that there was a death in the family.
Right.
And sometimes these are something where the grandmother passed away in Florida, the grandson lives in Oregon. It's really difficult for him. Like those are the easier ones. But sometimes you have emotional complexity that you're dealing with, right? So let's say that the common factor here with probate, nobody knows how to deal with probate, right? Nobody's been through this. You don't expect this, right? You don't anticipate probate. Nobody's doing the research going in. Nobody's figuring out what their alternatives are. So if you go into a probate situation and say, hey, I can give you cash for your house, that's not solving a problem, right? Their problem is that they don't know what their alternatives are. The problem is that they're getting a lot of different advice from different places. So if you could take a step back and you could say in your messaging, like, look, I know the probate situation is confusing. It's a great starting point. I can just explain it to you, like what the steps are, what your alternatives are. And if you need time, that's fine. But I'd love to get you that research information you need to help make a valuable decision, or help make a decision that works for you. And all you're doing is being counselor, right? And you're solving the problem. But if you look at every piece of data that you could come up with, pre-foreclosure, put yourself in their shoes and think about what you would say on a discovery call, or think about the discovery calls that you've had. How can you reverse engineer that and start to problem solve from the point of messaging them, right? High equity. They're not going to be in a rush. They're probably older. Like how are you going to take, again, look at your discovery call. Think about what goes on in that discovery call, reverse engineer it, start with problem solving, right? So getting out of this like blanket messaging and instead messaging to individuals with the intention of solving problems for those individuals will get you a lot farther than just hitting volume. Volume does nothing. Intention does something. Focus does something. Anybody else have an example they want to bring up in terms of like a certain targeted list type and how you want to maybe think about that particular list type?
Yes, we can go with tax delinquent with absentee owned out of state owners.
Okay. So an out of state owner, right? So and anybody chime in here. How do those discovery calls usually go? What problems do they have, and what kind of solutions are they typically looking for when you get to the point where you're actually conversing with that homeowner, closing that deal? You can either speak up or type it out, whatever's easiest.
They haven't been to the property in many years. They don't know what's going on in the area. They are emotionally detached. And all they see are bills and difficult tenants.
Okay, good. So let's we'll hold off on the tenants question for a second, right? Because that is something that you could move into a second or third message. By the way, do you have any tenants? Right. So that question is like a second or third message. By the way, do you have tenants currently in place? That's a yes or no question, right? They're either going to say yes or no, but either way, they're continuing to engage with you, and it's giving you more information to be able to positively problem solve for them. But again, so these are all common things with out-of-state homeowners, right? Like they haven't been there in a while. The property is not being maintained. They don't have either the time or the means to deal with it. So how can you problem solve for that, right? Like, are you able to set up a remote site visit kind of thing? Can you help them to set up someone to go and do a review of the house remotely so that you can get that fair contract offer to them? But in any case, you want to do something that is shortening the process for them, taking away steps, right? So approach them in the ways that you can take away steps, because they've already gotten 10 messages saying, do you want cash for your house? Right? That's not going to stand out. That's not going to get them. How can you take steps away? Right? Everybody else is saying cash. If you can say, I'm going to eliminate these 3 steps for you, you want to talk about how, that might grab their attention. And if it does, know at which point you continue via text and at which point you pick up the phone call and you problem solve over the phone. That's on you as an investor to decide when that trigger point is. But if you go into that conversation knowing that I segmented my data down to out-of-state homeowners, I know that out-of-state homeowners, I need to take steps away. Okay, I'm going to approach this right from the beginning of saying, you know, hey, Jason, I know you've that property at 57 Green Street, want to help eliminate some steps for you if you're looking to get to you know, move away from it. Let's have a conversation. You know, that's not the best message, but that idea of taking steps away, that's how you want to go into it. So really start to think about segmenting your data, thinking about the problem solved for the homeowners and how you can do that. Because again, this all goes back to user experience. Right? If the homeowner feels like, let's say they've gotten 10 messages over the last 2 weeks, and every single one of those 10 messages said, do you want cash for your house? And then one person came in and said, hey, let me solve some problems for you. Who are they going to, they're going to opt out of the 10 and they're going to keep your conversation because your conversation was different and it did something for them. It solved problems for them. Right? So it's a positive user experience. You stood out from the white noise. You stood out from the competition. So the more you can segment, the better user experience you can create, the more chance you have of keeping the active attention of that homeowner. By doing so, you're upping your chances of closing that deal. Make sense so far?
Yes, it does. Michael, I got a question here.
Mm-hmm.
As you just mentioned, like everyone is doing the same thing. Are you the owner of this property? And if you are you willing to sell this? This is our initial template that almost 90% of people are using, right? So
Right.
if we, you know, if we take a step back from this template and we want to start with a new strategy that you just mentioned to go with the solutions to the seller, like this is something you are suffering through and this is what I can help you with, right? Don't you think that is going to elongate the process? Because initially then we have to start with something else. And I want your suggestion on that. Like if a person is going through probate, what initial text that we should send to that person, which will confirm ownership for us and confirm the willingness of selling that property?
I think that confirming ownership is unnecessary, right? Like if you send a text message that starts with solutions for probate and they don't own that house, they're going to tell you, I don't own the house. So asking for confirmation of ownership is a wasted message, in my opinion. Like if they don't own the house, they're always going to tell you, I don't own the house, right? You could start with anything. They could not be in probate. You could start by, you know, never ever say this, but you could start with the wrong approach and say, hey, I know you're 55 years old and have high equity in your home. You know, never ever do that. But even if you did that and you had the wrong information about them and the home, they're still going to say, I'm not that person. I don't own that house. So you're burning a message by confirming ownership. The thing that is successful about that message is not the confirmation of ownership. It's the fact that they asked a simple yes or no question. Right? Because when people read a text, hang on, let me finish real quick. When people read a text, right, there is a tendency to respond, almost a desire to respond. And if you ask something really simple, hey, Jason, is that an orange shirt you're wearing? Yeah, why? Right? Like people will almost like off the top of their head respond because you asked something really basic, really simple, right? So even if you're presenting something that is problem solving for probate, throw in a simple question. Just don't make it confirmation of ownership because they'll tell you either way. But if you can ask a yes, no question, ask a simple call to action question that is a quick response mechanism, That gets them into the inbox. If you get them into the inbox, you have a lot more opportunity to get to the point of discovery call. It's all about getting them to the inbox. So the only thing relevant about that confirmation nonsense, or that confirmation of ownership nonsense, is that it's a yes/no question.
Okay. I mentioned this thing because we have observed this in the past. Before we were not using this strategy of confirmation of ownership. But when we used to push leads or CRM for our acquisition team to call them, we come to know that most of them are not the owners. They were just kidding around. Make sense?
Well, I mean, if most of them are not owners, that's a data question. Like, where are you getting the data from, right? Launch control, like, to get the best results out of launch control, you have to start with good data, right? It's like putting fuel in the tank. If you're putting gas mixed with sugar into the tank, it ain't gonna go well, right? So if you're getting a lot of those responses, the question should not be about deliverability. It should not be about response. It should be, what kind of fuel am I putting into the tank, and do I need to look at this? Because it's just, inaccurate data is going to get you nowhere.
Okay, so there is no skip tracing channel that provides just one phone number for the actual owner. You actually have possibilities there as well. Like when you skip trace a single prospect, you get 6 to 7 phone numbers for that specific prospect. So one of them is going to be the correct number for that person. So definitely we are going to text everyone as soon as they are not verified. Make sense?
Well, yeah, it kind of. Like those numbers through like 6, 7, whatever, that's nonsense. Like that sixth number is probably a phone number that I had when I was in university. That was a long time ago and totally irrelevant, right?
Okay.
So what matters, like, I don't have an exact percentage off the top of my head, but the vast majority of first numbers are the verified number, and it goes way, way, way down after that, diminishing returns, which is why we only allow 3. And we've even thought about limiting it to less than 3, because of the fact that it's so rarely the second or third number. It's almost always that first number that you put in is going to be the one that you verify, which is why it's so important that you guys go through and actually verify numbers. So you're not burning message segments by having messages go to the wrong person, which is creating, again, bad user experience. Verifying messages creates good user experience. It locks it into a thread, and it saves you money because you're staying proactive on identifying who the actual homeowner is.
Makes sense. Thanks for the clearance.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to say a couple of things that should be really, really obvious now that I've said all of that about targeting. It's about conversations, not volume. Okay. I'm going to be like a teacher about this. I don't want to hear anybody ask the question, how many text messages to a deal? That's not the right question. The right question is, how many discovery calls did I get from my inbox this week? That should be the question, because that's the only thing that matters. If you can't get to discovery call, you're not going to get a deal, right? So if you had 200 responses, and of those 200 responses, 100 or 90 were workable leads, somewhere between nurture, drip, and hot, right? How many of those did you convert to discovery calls? That's the only metric that you should be worried about, right? Volume of messages does not matter. It's the ability to convert responses in the inbox to the point of discovery call. That's the only metric that you should be measuring. Okay, never recycle data. Like we see people try to do this, where find some loophole, some workaround to be able to send the same person the same message. I hope by now it's become pretty clear that that's going to be wildly ineffective. Don't do that. All right, it's not about hitting quotas. It's about, other than the quota of a minimum of discovery calls. That should be, again, the only quota that you have. And that should be where you're looking to expand your business. How can I land more discovery calls? How can I close more deals? And all of that happens in the inbox, not in the outbound side where you're sending additional messages.
So I have a question here. When we do follow-up campaigns, we are actually texting the same people with the same text, if it makes sense.
Don't do that. Look, guys, think about it.
What we should do that for non-responders.
Okay, well, think about your own phone, right? Like if somebody sent you a message and said, hey, Peter, want to grab coffee at 4 p.m. or want to grab coffee this afternoon? And you didn't respond. And then 30 days later said, hey, Peter, want to grab coffee this afternoon? And then 30 days later, hey, Peter, want to grab coffee this afternoon? Not working. And it's also not human engagement, right? It becomes a very clear marker that you're not texting them one-on-one, that this is in some way a mechanized system. If it's a mechanized system, it's bad user experience. If it's bad user experience, you're not going to have success, right? So if you send a message to that probate list looking to solve problems, and you said in your first message something along the lines of, I know that the whole probate system can be confusing. Happy to be a resource, walk you through kind of what the tripping points are and what your alternatives are. Should we set up a call sometime this week? All right. And then your follow-up message is, hey, just wanted to check in with you. I know that you were dealing with the probate situation about a month or so ago. Any updates, any advice that I can offer, any help that I can provide? Now you have a thread, right? Now it's a logical conversation where you were picking up on the beginning of the conversation that you activated. That is going to give you a far higher chance of response than saying the same damn thing over again and creating a very mechanized conversation that clearly isn't a human-to-human conversation. Again, bad user experience equals bad results.
I will say, typically, when you point out people's problems through the text messages, whether it be probate or vacancy or pre-foreclosure, in some way, even if you don't address it directly, people get very defensive. Like we tend to avoid signaling that they're going through any sort of distress, just because, like I said, people get defensive and then they either don't respond or they get upset that you're messaging them about it. So how would you deal with that?
Yeah. So here's the analogy. Great question. Great question. I understand it completely. So this is the analogy that I always give. If you're walking down the side of the road and you see somebody stuck in a ditch, you don't go, hey man, you're in a ditch. Do you need help? You throw them a rope, or you assume they need help, right? So if somebody's in pre-foreclosure and you say something like, look, nobody wants the bank to take their house. I know you guys are in pre-foreclosure. Happy to, give you some cash alternatives. Well, now they know that they're in pre-foreclosure. That sucks, right? Like that's nobody wants to know that you have insight into their financial problems, right? If you come into it and you go, the solution that because most people don't know that direct sell is an opportunity. They don't know that creative financing is an opportunity or subject to, right? So if you're coming in with the solutions of, they think the bank's going to take their house, they think they have no alternatives other than to borrow money from family to fix it up and take care of it, right? I'm going to come in just with the solutions. So instead of saying something about pre-foreclosure, your message is more along the lines of, I specialize in kind of non-MLS deals in the area, kind of giving people some opportunities to direct sell or even to go into some specialized financing. Is that something you'd be interested in learning more about? Yes or no question, right? And see what they say, because you're not, in that case, you're not saying, I know that you're in trouble. Right, you're starting with the solutions to the problem that they have, without saying, I know that you have a problem. Right, because again, like all of this is public data, right? Like that's where everybody's getting it from, but nobody likes to know that. Like I did a podcast last week with Steve Trang's for Real Estate Disruptors with Steve Trang. And he said he had a friend who, owned a house. He got some liens on the house. And he asked Steve, he's like, how do I get taken off this list? I keep getting sent messages. And he's like, oh, no, you're on it. Like, there's no getting off it now. Right. It's because it's all based on public record, right? People can get those lists from anywhere, and it fits certain filtering. So they're getting a lot of people coming at them with, I know what your problem is, I can help. So if you come in and you drop the problem part and you just start with the solutions, you'll have a much better chance of standing out without them getting upset. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. I think that makes a lot of sense. Actually, we'll give that a go. We hadn't tried that before. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I'm gonna.
Can I also ask one more question about recycling the data? Because
Yeah.
I mean, we do a decent amount of volume with launch control, and after about the second or third follow-up text message, essentially the lead is dead at that point, right? If someone opens up their phone and they see a fourth follow-up message, they know that they hadn't responded to all the previous ones, and so the inclination is, I'm not going to respond to this one. So historically in the past, what we've done is restarted launch control accounts and re-uploaded our data in there. And every time we do that, we're able to get much higher response rates from some of the people who were on the fourth follow-up campaigns. And that's because it's just a fresh text message, right? It's from a new number, completely new message template. And so you're more likely to get a response from them. Whether it's the actual person or not, you're more likely to get a response. So I guess, what is launch control's new solution to leads just going stale or prospects going stale after you're on your fourth or fifth follow-up? Because I mean, after a certain amount of time, that lead's not going anywhere.
Yeah, so let me take a quick pause here and tell you guys, like, because we're going to run out of time, and so I'm going to speed through some of the rest of this. But what I think we can do, if everyone's interested, like, let us know in the chat, let Jason know. But if you guys, we can break this off into segments, and we can go into compliance and engagement best practices for data, compliance and engagement best practices for messaging, and then compliance and engagement best practices for list building, right? And all of those we can do as separate sessions where we can really deep dive into them, because this is something we could spin this into like a 3-hour conversation easily, right? But to answer your question, I'll ask you a challenge question. Is it because you opened a new account and sent them another message, or is it a question of timing? They just weren't ready to sell initially, and because of the extension of timing, maybe they are now, right? So it's a lot of times it is because it is a question of timing, right? And it's also about overcoming the trust barrier, right? Because because wholesaling or direct sales options are not that known, there's a trust barrier that has to be overcome. And look, I'll be honest with you guys, like, the reason why on the registration side, the reason why the cash for houses thing is being looked at is because there's been some fraud based around that in the past. And so the carriers are very leery from a recipient standpoint of letting a business operating under that marketing spin to operate, because there's been enough fraud that they feel they need to protect their users against that, right? So that is just by way of explaining that there's a trust issue we have to overcome, right? That we have to be able to build trust with the homeowner. Now, I think that there's a real versus mentality in marketing within the real estate investment space that we all need to work together to get rid of, right? Because it's all about being able to take whatever data you have and finding the best possible way to convert that data. So everybody is doing, and we'll do a whole special section on this, on how to do cheap omni-channel marketing. But think of it this way as a loop. And I know that not everyone can afford direct mail, so I'm just going to use this as an example, but there are much cheaper ways that you can do this, right? So you send your initial text messages through launch, you follow up with them, maybe you follow up again 60 days later. You've taken as much as you can out of round one of that data and tried to convert it. You take anyone that didn't respond, you put them into a direct mail campaign. Now you're going to get some leads that's passive, right? You got to wait for them to come to you, but you're going to have some more leads that come to you. And let's say that you get, I don't know, 40 discovery calls based off of that direct mail campaign. and you closed 5 deals, right? 5 deals, that's good. You know, maybe probably 100 grand off that. But you have 30 of those discovery calls that didn't close. So then you put those names back into launch control and you retarget them. But now it's a wanted conversation because you're picking up the conversation you already started. So that text message that you're sending is a continuation of that conversation that you had based off of that direct mail motivated lead. Now, when they engage with that SMS message through launch, then you can push them back to a phone call and you can close that out. Because again, it's a matter of timing, right? Like just because they didn't close in that first initial discovery call, they're still in a situation where they own a distressed home. And that usually gets further distressed, not better, right? So if you're able to take mixed marketing and use SMS to retarget, or use those leads that you didn't convert through SMS and try them through another funnel and then wrap them back through SMS again, what you're doing is maximizing your data. You're not bucketing it as SMS data, cold call data, direct mail data, but instead you're using each of the marketing PPC data, TV ad data, social data, whatever. You're taking all of it and you're putting it into a multi-marketing channel system that uses SMS as a through line and allows you to take, say, whatever your conversion rate is and augment that 10%, 20%. But how many hundreds of thousands of dollars are in that 10, 20%? Does that make sense to everybody, or was that too fast?
It makes sense to some degree, right? So what's the purpose of the follow-ups then? If they don't pick up on the initial message, and then, because what we do is we'll follow up with them within the next 30 days, right? And we have maybe like 4 or 5 variations of the same message with the follow-ups, right? So what you're saying, if they don't respond to me, go ahead and put them on another marketing channel and then follow up back and then call them back again?
So we'll get into cadence building, but if you think about it, right, like you sent out the initial message via text. They didn't respond. I forget to respond to my mom sometimes. Like that happens, right? Doesn't mean that they're not interested. It just they just happen to not respond, right? So you want to send the follow-up retargeting message because it's going to end up in that same thread. And maybe they've, in the meantime, done a little research into direct sell options and they're more willing to talk. So you definitely want to send that. Now, what you guys want to do, though, is map out your system of touch points, right? So if they don't respond in the first message, are you calling them or are you just letting it sit for those 30 days? If they don't respond after the 30 days, what's your next set of action, right? Because someone didn't respond to a direct mail piece or didn't respond to an email or didn't respond to a text doesn't mean that they're not winnable. It's just about finding the right cadence of messaging so that you're able to break through and again, get to that point of having a discovery call with them, right? So you want to be able and think user experience, right? If you do this, if you send them a text message and then call them every day for a week and a half, not going to work out well, right? Thumbs down.
Right.
That's a poor user experience for absolutely everyone, right? However, if you, you send them a text message, you give them a call maybe a couple weeks later just to see if they pick up so you can get through that discovery call. And then your follow-up message says something like, hey, just following up by that text. Actually, I also tried to call you a couple weeks ago. Any information that I can help provide to help you make your decision. And then in that message, say, by the way, you can opt out, right? Like giving them the option to opt out when you get to that point where you've had 3 touch points is a positive. That's a good user experience. Because if they're opting out of text, they're not opting out of communication with you. They're simply opting out of text, right? So you're giving them that good user experience and you're giving them the option to take that choice. Now they may respond opt out. They may respond, hey, didn't have a chance to respond. I'm just not looking to sell right now. Okay, well now it's still a drip opportunity, right? Because they responded. Now they're in the inbox, right? You got what you wanted in terms of getting them to engage. Now, how do you play that conversation? But you really want to think about the through line of the conversation from the user experience, and to be able to have these interconnected messages, these interconnected conversations that feel like they are part of a connected one-on-one conversation. That's the end goal, because if you do that, they're much more likely to engage and much more likely to end up on a call with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Valuable.
Okay. So let me spin through a few more things in terms of messaging and then list building, and then we'll go to Q&A. We'll extend this one another 15 minutes if that's okay with everybody, and then we'll wrap it up at 11:15. Well, it's 11:15 my time. I don't know what time it is your time. Okay. So for messaging, again, this is a bit repetitive, but importantly repetitive. Like, don't think in terms of data, think in terms of people. Value the recipient, speak to the recipient, right? Send a text, don't send an email. Having a really long explanatory text, it's not the form of text. Text is quick. Think, don't write incomplete sentences as in like poor grammar, but the way most people respond in a text is something like, instead of saying like, yes, thank you, I will be there at 4 p.m. sharp, they say, yep, be there at 4 p.m. All right, starting with verbs, keep it short. So text the way that you would text. Okay. Don't drop conversations. This kills me. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of poor user experience all the way through. And I see this happening a lot. All right, so this is a campaign. And again, remember back to the beginning of our conversation, TCPA versus CTIA. CTIA will get your campaign blocked if you break those best practices, which is just the end of a business-to-business relationship with the carrier, nothing legal. This person, the carriers came to us and said, can you audit this account? Looks like it's some poor user experience. So we did. And they were right. What the investor had done was sent an initial message to the person, and the person said, no, I'm not interested in selling right now. Something along those lines. Not a hard no, definitely a drip campaign situation. But the person didn't close the conversation. They didn't say, okay, thanks for letting me know, have a great afternoon. They just dropped it, right? And then they put that person on a drip automation. And the drip automation said the very basic, like, hey, how about a cash offer for your house, right? So now in the thread, the person gets, hey, I can give you a cash offer for your house. How's that sound? Not interested in selling right now. Then 30 days later, how about a cash offer for your house? Does that feel like a good user experience? And so the person replied a little bit more forcefully now, hey man, I told you no, I'm not interested, right? At that point, the person should have taken them off of that drip campaign. You can keep the data, you can re-engage with them another way, but the person clearly doesn't want text. And when they responded, they got taken off of the drip campaign. You guys know that that's how it works, right? They respond, they get back to the inbox. So what this investor did was, instead of replying again, just didn't reply, simply put them back on the drip campaign. 30 days later, they got the exact same message. Now the homeowner's mad, right? Because they're getting zero response from this investor. And they're like, hey, how many times do I have to tell you I'm not going to sell my house? Still didn't DNC them. Instead, put them back on the drip campaign again without responding. Hey, and of course they got themselves reported. Of course they did. Imagine that from a user perspective. That sucks. It doesn't value the homeowner. It shows a no listening, and it absolutely does not follow a cadence of actual text engagement. So you do that kind of thing, forget it. Like, you're going to get yourself in trouble, right? And we limit that as much as we can, right? So like, if somebody says, if that guy had just replied, stop, the system would have DNC'd him, because that is what we can do to create better compliance. is to respect the homeowner's wishes. But if the guy phrases it something like, hey man, how many times do I have to ask you not to send me these messages? I'm not interested in selling. We can't engineer a solution for that. That has to be a partnership with y'all. You have to be able to look at that and go, I'm going to do the right thing here. And I'm gonna give this a cool down period at the very least with this homeowner. He's not ready yet. And I might, you might try it through another marketing channel, right? Like you have other information, you might be able to get him through another marketing channel, but give it a cool down at the very least with text, right? Because he's just not having it. And if he's really not having it, or they're really not having it, DNC them. It's not worth pushing and pushing and pushing through one marketing channel when what your end goal is to engage with this homeowner and to have a discovery call. There's no point in over pushing through a single marketing channel to the point of frustration on the homeowner's end. You want to help them. You want to be a solution for them. Being a pest is not going to be a solution. So when an automated system that you're running equals that kind of behavior, that's garbage. Like that's a garbage user experience, and it's not going to get you good results, right? So you have to think of the human experience here in order to get better results. Any questions about that cadence? That all makes sense? Okay, another quick thing, and then a couple more quick things, and we'll go to Q&A. Have a decision tree, all right? If you're not running this yourself, you guys know what the responses that come in are. There's not that many, right? So have a decision tree for the person running your system for you, right? So look, if the person says that they want $500,000 for the house and it's worth 120, what do? Is this a pick up the phone situation? If so, then the person running your system needs to know that they need to notify the sales agent to pick up the phone, right? Because if you have a real opportunity for a discovery call, you want to eliminate as much as possible a call to schedule a call. You want to just get it done, right? So what do you do in that situation? Think through each of the responses. Is it a text response? If it's a text response and it's a conversation closeout, like I said, like, hey, well, have a great afternoon. What do they say? If you know what you want them to say, build that into the quick replies. So all they have to do is choose the conversation closeout from the quick replies and close the conversation, then put it on a drip campaign, right? So it's having that decision tree mapped out so that the person knowing it can just look at their other monitor and be like, this response gets this response gets this and this. This response is a direct push to the sales agent. And you have a playbook for every response that comes in. Because you guys know this, you send a batch, it's not like you get 40 unique responses. You get somewhere between 5 to 10 repetitive responses. So how do you map those repetitive responses to get the best possible results? We can help a little bit, but mainly this is on you guys. This is your sales conversion system. And this is getting into the stuff that don't save the charm for the discovery call, right? Put it into the initial engagement. How would you further that conversation via discovery call? Map that into your decision tree so that the person running the system knows how to advance the conversation the way you would want the conversation advanced. Okay. If you have questions about, for instance, like in that inbox decision trees section, really, like I think that's mostly on you guys, but we're willing to help. We're happy to help a little bit. In terms of drip automations, we want those drip automations to pick up at the exit point of the conversation, right? So where did the conversation end, and what do we know about the homeowner, right? So going back up to targeted lists, right? So let's say you have a targeted list for probate, and you got to the point of discovery call, and it didn't quite close out, and you want to put that person on a drip. That's a very different drip than hey, how about cash for your house now? How about cash for your house now? It's a continuation of conversations and picking up that conversation at the exit point of the conversation. So if you want some strategy around how to craft those drip automations, do come to us for those. We will 100% help you on that. But definitely kind of think through those situations of where you would need to have an exit point conversation, or where you would need to move a conversation to a drip. Okay. The last thing that I want to go over is building inbound or opt-in leads. Okay, so when we talk about compliance, to be 100%, no question marks, no gray area compliant on both ends, you get the person opt-in. They ticked the box. They said, yes, you can communicate with me via SMS. Or you can even get them to opt in. If you got them to opt in over a phone call, something like that, let us know, and we can help you with messages that say something like, hey, just picking up our conversation on the phone. I know you opted in for text. You can message us here anytime, or you can opt out by blah, 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 right? So that again, it's a continuation of an ongoing conversation. We can help you guys figure that part out. But 100% opt-in is 100% compliant. That's just true, right? So you've got this website set up. You've got opt-in on the website because you had to register. How can we use that to actually start building a flow of inbound leads, motivated leads, people that are coming to us, right? Like I say this about launch control all the time. If launch control gets 15,000 page visits during a month, those are people looking specifically for launch control or SMS engagement solutions in real estate. They didn't, type in cool rocket logo, right? Like they didn't accidentally land on launch control. They got there on purpose, intentionally. So if people are looking for alternatives, looking for ways that they can go non-MLS with their house, looking to see if there's anything else they can do, looking even for direct cash offers, and they come to you, those are really great leads, right? And if you're unable to close them on that first call that you have with them, retarget them through launch, and we'll close them out that way. But you have opt-in, right? So we have tons of options. If we can all start to build up and take advantage of this structure that we're putting into place to gather more opt-in leads and come up with some cheap, effective marketing to drive leads to us, which we can do a whole separate talk on that, then we're, again, building a better user experience and a better relationship for you with the carriers, because now you do truly have not just prospecting data, but a mixture of opt-in and prospecting data, and it's trending in the direction that they want from a business-to-business relationship. And there are some ways that we can do that, and that are very cost-effective. So we can go in, again, go into that in a separate talk. But does that make sense for everyone? All right, cool. Sorry, guys. I know this has been a lot of me talking, but we had a lot to get through. So I appreciate you bearing with me. Jason, you want to go over some of the Q&A stuff? We'll take a few minutes to answer anything that wasn't previously answered.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I tried my best to answer along the way, pretty much via messaging. So I believe, so
If
Billy.
anybody has any new questions, just, speak up or drop them in the chat.
Yep. So Billy had a question right in the beginning, asking, can you share the legal cases you're referring to where this was successfully litigated?
Yeah, guys. I mean, look, we can set you up with referrals to people that are like legal compliance experts if you really want to talk to someone about this. I'm not a lawyer, but they're going to end up telling you what we said at the beginning. Right. As far as those legal cases, like I think one of them, if anybody's in the Collective Genius group, I think one of them was posted there. I can see if I can find it, but it's boring. It's basically that, they went through the whole process, determined that they weren't selling a product or service, and then if you dug into it, it turns out that they were not creating a good user experience, and they just pushed when they shouldn't have pushed, and that's what really got them to where they were.
Other questions I managed to answer. Follow-up campaigns, the question from Rachel. Also, does LC have a way to export data by the MOLA? I answered that one as well. So being a bus, he joined a little bit late, but hopefully I managed to explain properly when it comes to the difference between TCPA and CTIA. So I believe we have those questions covered. So if anybody has any new questions, just no need to even post it in the chat. Just feel free to unmute yourself and hopefully we'll have an answer for you.
And let's also take a quick poll. I know, Damola, you will absolutely do more of a deep dive, but let's pick a starting point. So do you guys want to start with options for building up opt-in leads, number one? And as part of that would be multi-channel marketing, right? So opt-in leads, multi-channel marketing. Would you prefer to go over setting up the best engagement sequences for your company? So how we can go from initial message to retargeting message to variation of drip campaigns and just really focus on what we do within the system? Or do you guys want to talk about kind of data segmenting and then how to apply that to your system? So we got one.
I'm more curious about the messaging personally.
Okay. Got a lot on option 2. Okay. All right, cool. So we'll do that. We can do a deeper dive into messaging, but what would be really helpful if you guys could communicate this with, actually, let's do this. I'll work something out with Jason. We'll send you guys in a follow-up. We'll give you the option to include some potential use cases, because what we'll want to do is map this out. Like, so using the probate example, right? So how do we create a full through line for probate, and what is that kind of messaging and connective engagement structure look like? Out-of-state landlords, what does that look like? But we'll give you guys the opportunity to chime in with some of the use cases that you'd like to see. We're not going to cover all of them, obviously, but we'll map out a few of them so that we can see some different approaches and map the similarities and the differences. And then in there, we'll sprinkle in a little bit of option 1 and 3. All right, because if we're looking at a data set, we're looking at a use case, there's going to be hyper segmented data that led to that engagement flow. From that engagement flow, there may be some multi-marketing opportunities to either retarget through other marketing channels or to use other marketing channels to retarget through SMS as part of this flow, right? Because what we want to do is we're mapping life cycle. Right. So from the point of engagement to the point of the closed deal, what were all of those touch points? And sometimes that timing structure can be as much as a year. So it's not always going to be exclusively SMS within that year. So where can we look at the exit points where we might want to try other options to get it looped back into that data conversion loop or that data conversion structure? Okay, so I think we can wrap it up here. If we don't have any more immediate questions, we're going to send a follow-up. The follow-up will include the recording as well as the notes that Jason had posted on screen, and then we'll get that option 2 messaging and engagement flow mastermind scheduled in the near future, and we have everybody join for that one as well. If you have any follow-up questions, I know that sometimes the questions hit late after as soon as you log off, you think of something. Feel free to add those as well in your response, and then we'll either get those answered or cover it in the next session.
Sounds good. Alrighty. Everybody, by the way, since I did not do a proper intro, the person that you were listening to right now was Michael Bartolome. So he's our Chief Commercial Officer. Definitely, he's the person that I've learned many of what I know. A lot of the things that I know now, he was the source of information, whether through directly him or somebody else that he thought. But definitely everything that he shared are straight up gold nuggets, right? So it's all about keeping you guys safe and making sure that you text uninterruptedly and hopefully never have to get a phone call from one of our CSMs telling you like, hey, well, you're no longer able to send the batches until things are fixed. So let's make sure we implement a lot of the things that we've heard here, if not everything, and well, stay compliant as the purpose of this mastermind was.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, y'all. Enjoy your afternoon. I'm going to close out the conversation. Have a great afternoon. And we'll pick it up later.
Take care, guys. Have an amazing week.
Bye, everyone.